Your boss is watching. Welcome back to Sports Federation TV. We moving on to something that's more generic, something that I think will perk the interest of many of our viewers. We're now moving on to chatting a bit about principles of sport coaching. And many of us are coaches, many of us are parents who want the best for the kids. But in order to do that, we need to understand the basics of coaching. Many of us don't go to coaching courses because we don't have the time, or we just don't see the need for it. We become internet coaches where we Google everything and we implement what we learn on Google. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We now got in studio a young lady who has got a wealth of knowledge, both as an athlete and now as a sports scientist. Shaundre, you well?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Welcome into the studio.
Thanks.
Who are you and what's your link to sport? I mean, you've come a long way. Tell us briefly, as an athlete, what was your accomplishments?
Okay, so I started at a young age running. I started first in long distance, but then I didn't like it because it was too long. And then I went over into sprints, and that was where I fell in love with the track. I competed for Western Province as well as for Stellenbosch University, where I completed my studies. Whilst doing athletics, I started my bachelor's degree at Stellenbosch University as well as my honours. Thereafter I went to Belgium, where I completed my master's degree, all in sports science, and currently I'm busy doing my doctorate at Stellenbosch University.
So soon we'll have to call you Dr. Jacobs.
Yes. Please don't.
What's your thesis on?
My thesis at the moment is the effectiveness of the academy system within the Western Cape.
Okay, and that's a myriad of topics on its own. Let's focus on the task tonight. What we want to do is we want to explore some of the aspects and protocols within coaching. So I want you to explain to us what is periodization. Let's start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Well, a periodization plan is basically an organization or a systematic plan which coaches use, where they can put on their competitions as well as see if the athlete is peaking or not. You have different type of phases which you actually have, and then you have what we call the macro cycle, which is different months or different weeks broken up, and that is where we look at flexibility, you look at strength, you look at power, and it's mostly 4 to 6 weeks within one macro cycle. You can have it less if you choose, it depends on the coach's philosophy. Then you have what we call a microcycle, which is a daily or 1 week plan. So what you're doing from Monday to Friday, or Monday to Saturday, or Sunday if you're training as well. Then we have a mesocycle, which is basically a few months, and that is what we call general prep, specific prep, or you have competition phase or the active recovery phase.
And all of this is linked to a goal.
Yes, it's all linked to a goal.
So effectively you choose SA Champs as an example,
Mm-hmm.
and you work your way back to general, then specific. And is that how it works?
Yes. How we work, for example, if I'm working with an athlete from athletics, we'll start in the winter, which is August down to November, and we'll work on a general prep. So that will be functional training, working your aerobic base, your cardio. That will be circuits as well, just own body weight. Then you'll progress into tempo runs, which is speed endurance. And then you will have strength training, and then you move it to more explosive speed or whatever. It depends what the athlete does, the event. And based on that, we'll move into the competition phase, where it's basically a maintenance of what you did in the winter, as well as the peak, where the athlete wants to go.
And you touched on now that we know all of that, you've touched on an interesting point, that in a microcycle, it's a daily activity.
Mm-hmm.
So as a coach, would I need to know what my athlete feels like on a day-to-day basis, or how do you monitor those kinds of activities?
Yes, of course. That's why in the program that I'm at, we actually made our own program. It's called the EMIS program. We look at the daily, what the athlete eats daily, so breakfast, lunch and supper. We look at the resting heart rate. We look at the hours slept. We look at the training load, which is basically duration, and RPE, the rate of perceived exertion. We look at how the athlete felt. Did he feel good? Did he feel bad? Also the intensity of the training, which is perceived from the athlete, because the coach might feel like, oh, the training intensity was medium, but the athlete perceived it as high. So based on all those statistics, I will write a report, a weekly report or daily if the coach asks that, and see if the athlete is coping, if he's overreaching, or if he's overtrained, if the adaptations that he's making is on par with the goal and where they need to be.
And that's important feedback that you as a coach need to make, and obviously adjust your training accordingly. Because even though you've got a plan, is your plan cast in stone, or is it kind of flexible to a point?
It needs to be flexible. For example, if the athlete is not being able to deal with the load that is being placed on him, you need to adapt your program. That's why some coaches, they're really hard and they're like, no, you need to do this. But if the athlete can't cope, there's no adaptations which will be made. The athlete won't be giving 100%. So I feel that sometimes the athletes and the coach's relationship, they don't communicate this, and the athlete just keeps doing what the coach does, but then you'll see a few months down the line, the athlete is either injured or fatigued, overreaching or overtrained.
And in terms of loading, how do you know when you've given an athlete too much or when it's too little? Is it based on the RPE or how do you manage that kind of process?
It depends which form you use. Like for example, some coaches use the RPE, so that is how they can see if the athlete is coping or not, because a coach will give his own RPE of the session and then the athlete gives his RPE, so it needs to kind of be on par. If it's not, then you know, okay, I'm a bit too hard, or that was too mild of a session. You can also use heart rate monitors to see if the athlete is training in a certain zone, or you can use video analysis where technique plays a role. If you see the athlete's technique is dropping because the load is increasing, then you know, okay, you need to bring it down a bit. So there's different platforms. It just depends on the philosophy of the coach.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about the philosophy, and also want to pick on the idea of technique. When do you focus on technique? Let's take an ad break and we'll be back with Shaundre chatting coaching principles. See you now. Welcome back. We're chatting coaching principles. We've unpacked the process of periodization. We're now moving on to something a bit different. Shaundre, how do you know when to do code-specific type training in terms of technique? Is there a specific time in the season or is it whole season? How does it work?
It depends basically on the sport. I feel what you can't train in season, you need to train off season. So off season, there's not a lot of pressure on you. You basically work on fitness and you work on technique, but it depends on the code, as I say specifically. You basically need to look at the training principles of sport, and that is, for example, specificity, which is specific to the sport, the muscle, as well as the joint, and also specialization of the sport. Then you have, for example, adaptation, and adaptation needs to take place and within the muscle as well as within the athlete. Then you also have what we call overload principle, where you look at the muscle needs to be overload for the adaptations to take place. And then you have how we do that is look at reps, we look at sets, we also look at, for example, what sport code it is and the recovery of the athlete. Also recovery in the sense of within sets as well as recovery days, because I always say it's not how hard you train, but it's how you recover based on the adaptation that's been made.
And generally you should have 2 or 3 hard days and a recovery day.
Yeah.
Or do you have 5 hard days and 3 recovery days? Is it code specific, or is there a general principle one can use?
You can basically go on what the athlete feels, but normally we can go 3 days hard and then 1 day off. How we work in periodization, we work with weeks. Daily you can see how the athlete feels or what sport it is basically, but what we work is we work with 3 to 4 weeks high, so incrementally loading the athlete in 4 weeks time, and then 1 week down, and then you increase the load as it goes, so progressively or incrementally increasing the load.
And taking that recovery period into account, when it comes to competition, do I take a whole week off prior to competition, or is it 2 days, or is it again code specific?
It depends. That's what we call tapering. It's very important because a lot of athletes or coaches, they still feel that they need to go hard before competition, because they feel like they're running out of time or they didn't do too much. But actually, in fact, a week taper would be more than sufficient for an athlete. It depends what type of athlete you're doing and also the program, but I feel that 1 week should be more than efficient. You're doing active recovery, working on technique, maybe do some type of sprinting work if the athlete is a sprinter, cyclist or whoever, but then have the recovery be more than the actual set or whatever you're doing.
Having said that, would you take a cyclist and make them run as cross training as an example? Is cross training beneficial to sport?
Yes, I definitely believe in that. Cross training, a lot of people think that no, they're going to get injured, or the risk of fatigue is high. That's why I say you do it in off season, because what you don't train, you lose. So if you can't maintain sometimes, but some coaches have that ability to maintain. But if you can't, you train what you can't do in season, off season. I have a lot of athletes that I'm currently working with, canoeists, where we did running training, hill training, and they felt that the adaptations that they had in the boat or on the track, on a bike, was beneficial to them. It's a different type of training, but it could train the same muscles but at different extents. So you just need that external stimuli just to stimulate the muscle in a different way, but the same type of action of the muscle.
Absolutely. Give us an example of one or two of the athletes, if you may, or who you're working with and what's their goals.
We're currently working with beach volleyballers, Grant and Leo, and they are training to go to Rio next year. So that's beach volleyball. They're at the moment on the international circuit, competing, trying to get points. Then we have swimmers who were just in Italy, Shannon Austin as well as Rudolf Visser. They were in Italy competing in the galas over there. And then we have our other athletes just training in winter at the moment, trying to compete next year for Rio.
All four of those athletes were on the show previously. Shaundre, thank you for your time. We're going to get you back to explore some more principles about coaching techniques and principles, scientific principles of coaching. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see what's happening in the community diary for this weekend. As we heard earlier, the Western Province is hosting the fencing championships, the Commonwealth Fencing Championships, based at the UCT Sports Centre this week, from 8 in the morning till 5 at night. Check out their Facebook page for more information. We also have the Berg River Canoe Marathon. For those of you who are interested in a bit of water activity, go down to Paarl and watch the event. That happens from this week for the entire week as well. We also have, as was highlighted on last week's show, the SA Chess Open, which is happening at the Cape Town Stadium, which is historic. So it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and carries on till about 11 o'clock every single day until next Saturday. All that's left for me to say is thank you for watching. If you have any activities happening within your community, send it onto our Western Province Sports Council Facebook page, or tweet us, Alton Davis 25, or tweet Western Province Sport Council, and we'll definitely include it into the diary. Have yourself an amazing weekend. Play hard, be safe. Catch you next week, Friday, 9 o'clock. Cheers.